Elon Musk, the world's richest person, is now the first person to have a net worth surpassing $400 billion.
Water has got Wall Street's greedy hands in them. Nestle, the guy from Nestle, the CEO, doesn't think that water should be a human right. The CEO of Nestle doesn't think water should be a human right. Yeah, it's not all CEOs. Not all CEOs are in danger. Not all CEOs should feel in danger. Just the ones that exploit the poor and natural resources, obviously.
Finance, just like hedge funds were in the 2010s, and sometimes for a good reason. Average people have been told to hate them. Insufferable Wharton grads want to intern with them, and the industry is making more billionaires than oil, real estate, and even technology. The question is, are they creating value or just extracting it? These alternative investments used to be exactly that, alternatives. But the private equity market has changed in just the last 15 years from a small niche that was popular with a select few families to one of the biggest asset holders in the world. Because private equity is private, it can be hard to accurately estimate just how much capital is controlled by these firms. But a report published by the management consulting firm McKinsey & Company estimated that it was over $13 trillion as of June of last year. Given general market conditions and fundraising, it's likely to be even higher now. Now, there is nothing actually that special about private equity. It really just means any investment made into a business or security that is not listed on public markets. So if you invest $1,000 in your brother's farmer's market stall, you are technically a private equity investor. So, make sure to slap it on the LinkedIn profile. So the reason that private equity got so big so quickly has nothing to do with it being an amazing investment or anything silly like that. It's purely the result of a financial system that has become too concentrated. The American economy, finance, and business activity are all much bigger than they were in the 1990s, but the number of publicly listed companies has actually gone way down since then. In fact, it's almost halved in the same time the economy has tripled in size.
I want you to think about that for a second. The economy has tripled in size, and the number of companies have halved. Number one, that's not sustainable, but how does that not sound off any bells?
Now, one big reason for there being less publicly listed companies is simply because bigger companies have been acquiring smaller companies at record rates, making for a more concentrated business environment with fewer companies overall, which is, the whole point of this video. But we will actually get to the consolidation later. There are also fewer companies IPOing in the first place, because there really is no need to anymore. Companies list themselves on stock exchanges to raise money from the public, hence why it's called an initial public offering. But the general public just doesn't have that much money anymore. The wealthiest 10% of Americans now own 93% of all publicly listed stocks. The vast majority of capital flowing into public stock markets comes from people or institutions that are rich enough to invest in private equity, so the regulatory and reporting burden of being a public company just simply isn't worth it to get access to 90% of people who all collectively own just 7% of the market.
That is insane.
93% of stock ownership is largely held through retirement accounts, which are handled by funds which can invest into private equity as well. So for most companies, it just doesn't make sense to go public anymore. Now, alright, so what? People have slightly fewer options to ape their life savings into on Robinhood. Well, apart from that, this trend, which has only really been going on for 15 years at this point, is really causing a lot of problems, and costing you a lot more than you realize. The first issue that doesn't get nearly enough attention is how they have created micro-monopolies. When you think of monopolies, you are probably going to think of giant companies that own entire markets everywhere across the world. Like, YouTube. But a much more common type of monopoly has started to become a bigger problem. These are small, local monopolies. One of the hottest new private equity investments has become youth sports leagues. Little League is a great investment because firms can buy up all the sports in a local area and create a monopoly on competitive team activities. And nobody wants to be the parent that denies their child the opportunity to go and touch grass with their friends.
I remember Lake Mary Rams football here, when I was a kid, cost $100 to be a part of it, and I thought that was a lot of money. This was 1991. I wonder how much it costs now. My little brother probably knows because he played football. But I thought $100 was so much money. And I would rather spend it on like a guitar or something like that, which the guitar that I got, I think, was like $250 or something. But
according to a report by the Aspen Institute, these local leagues are collectively a $30 billion industry, and they are becoming more expensive as they are consolidated by private equity firms. Now, this is just one particularly scummy
Wow.
Institute, these local leagues are collectively a $30 billion industry, and they are becoming more.
For the Village's owners, it is a booming business, with registration fees just under $1,300 per player? Holy crap. Before selling a single milkshake for $10, hot dog for $7, or engraved baseball for $25. What is happening?
More expensive as they are consolidated by private equity firms. Now, this is just one particularly scummy example, but creating local monopolies is just a good business strategy. It's not technically legal, but the Federal Trade Commission just doesn't have the manpower to identify and enforce these thousands of local issues when they don't even really have the resources to go after the most obvious monopoly.
And in these next 4 years, the FCC chair that we had that was actually out doing stuff, tracking down, obviously being replaced. What was her name?
These subtle consolidations have changed how and where we spend our money, but it has had a much more serious impact on how we earn our money. So it's time to learn how money works to find out if it's possible to reverse the concentration of everything. Firms is that it makes it really hard to see what is actually happening in our own economy. Public companies have to release regular financial statements, and their market value is updated every microsecond as their stock is traded. As more of the market is held by a smaller group of investment firms, it gets harder to tell how these businesses are performing and how they are being run. John Coates, a professor of law and economics at Harvard, recently released a book called The Problem of 12, when a few financial institutions control everything, which addressed exactly this problem. Specifically, he mentions that pension funds have found private equity very attractive, and since most pension funds are investing on behalf of regular people, it can be very difficult for those people to see how their money is being used since there are two financial institutions between them and the business they are actually investing in. Coates also speaks about the concentration of capital in index funds like Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. He doesn't highlight the usual criticism like Larry Fink being a lizard man that secretly controls the global economy. But he does raise the issue that the way these financial products invest money makes normal price discovery much harder and also incentivizes getting more concentrated. Something like Vanguard's VOO ETF just mindlessly takes investor money and puts it directly into the weighted average of the 505 stocks that make up the S&P 500. And yes, there are actually
505 in the S&P 500. That's interesting.
5 stocks in the S&P 500 because some companies list Class A and B shares. Finance bros aren't very good at naming things. This means that a large share of investors are just investing in whatever has the most investors, which has just helped contribute to immense valuations of companies at the top of the market. The amount of investment capital concentrated through these investment managers means that they now have significant influence over company shareholder votes, and new products like ESG or green ETFs can have more influence over board decisions than they really should have. There will be a link in the description below to that book if you are interested in reading the whole thing, though you should know it was written for MBA students at Harvard, so it is a little bit dense. He also gave a half-hour interview just last month available here on YouTube, which is also worth checking out. Another big problem is corporate debt. Most of the biggest private equity firms in the world use what's called
this right here. This part here reminds me of a scene in Goodfellas, and I will play it after this.
A leveraged buyout. This is where they will buy a whole lot of companies, get those companies to take out big loans, and then use the borrowed money to pay themselves back so that they can go and buy even more companies. This normally involves a lot of cost cutting in the business so they can make their repayments. But on a wider scale, it's contributed to the record levels of corporate debt that we have in America today, which, as a percent of GDP, was only higher during the first wave of PPP loans, and just after the global financial crisis. Businesses always want to get more concentrated. It's the natural order that big businesses will acquire little businesses or put them out of work.
So this is what that reminds me of. Tell me how this is different than what these firms are doing.
Now the guy's got Paulie as a partner. Any problems, he goes to Paulie. Trouble with the bill, he can go to Paulie. Trouble with the cops, deliveries, Tommy, he can call Paulie. But now the guy's got to come up with Paulie's money every week, no matter what. Business bad? Fuck you, pay me. Oh, you had a fire? Fuck you, pay me. Place got hit by lightning, huh? Fuck you, pay me.
What if I get one of those TVs? Nah, I'll be stuck. You didn't break anything.
Also, Paulie could do anything, especially run up bills on the joint's credit. And why not? Nobody's gonna pay for it anyway. And as soon as the deliveries are made in the front door, you move the stuff out the back and sell it at a discount. You take a $200 case of booze and you sell it for $100. Doesn't matter, it's all profit. And then finally, when there's nothing left,
Fucking shame.
When you can't borrow another buck from the bank or buy another case of booze, you bust the joint out. You light a match.
Help reaching anything?
You look like you're decorating a Christmas tree, you fucking prick. You don't know what you're doing.
And that's it.
From 5 towns.
Well,
Who? Did you?
To put it simply,
so
Amaranth is a woman.
So that is what that reminds me of.
Rise of private equity, the proliferation of passive index funds, low interest rates, and the flaccid approach of regulators has only made this natural process much faster. But this still isn't the worst part. Corporate concentration has made finding competitive job opportunities extremely difficult, especially for people in smaller communities that have had local businesses quietly rolled up by large investment funds. The best way to get a higher salary as a worker is to switch jobs for better opportunities. But if you are a plumber and all of the plumbing businesses in the local area are owned by the same holding company, you aren't going to be able to negotiate like you would with competing businesses. Now, if you think you could get around this problem by starting a business of your own, well, actually it gets even worse.
Yeah.
In an article published by the Washington Post, Lillian Salerno, a healthcare entrepreneur, spoke about her difficulty in bringing a new, safer medical syringe to the market because businesses up and down the supply chain had become highly consolidated, so they didn't want to work with a potential competitor even if her product would have been better for patients. This is technically anti-competitive practice, but again, regulators are understaffed and underfunded. It's even worse in highly scalable industries like technology. The most important thing that early-stage investors now look for in startup companies is an exit strategy, which is just business speak for who is going to buy this company if it's successful. Those buyers are either a few of the industry top players or a private equity firm. The result of this is that only companies with the highest potential to scale and the best opportunity for acquisition actually get funded. Which is why places like Silicon Valley have gone from making technology to solve the world's problems to writing algorithms to keep you watching your phone for an extra 20 seconds a day. A blog post written by Ross Spears, who is ironically the president of a venture capital firm, called this the stagnant pool of American entrepreneurship. If you wanted to start a company tomorrow, you probably wouldn't know where to start, especially if you had to go and raise capital from professional investors. There are programs like Y Combinator that incubate early-stage companies, but access to these programs is highly competitive. The people that have the connections and experience to get these businesses started also know that the best way to run these businesses is to just build it so a bigger business comes along and buys it.
That's it.
The people that have felt this the worst are the tech bros. An entire generation of people were told that if they just learned to code, they would have a stable career for life.
Yep.
Go and watch my video on the rise and fall to find out how instead
So yeah, that's something that we have been told. That's something that I was told growing up. You know, work on computers, work on tech. And I did. I worked in IT for a little while, and it was fun, and then until it wasn't. And then it wasn't fun anymore, and I left. Not uncommon. In this particular case, after I left, you know, shit's apparently gone downhill since then, unless you learn to code, and even then, basic coding has been done by robots at this point, AI. All of this concentration, it comes from private equity and the finance bros, and ultimately the tech bros too. The tech bros are in some ways guilty as well. But the tech bros wouldn't be that way if the finance bros didn't poison the well with, look at how much money you can make. Then these nerds decided to get revenge on everybody else.